Okay.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Mayor and Council special meeting of the Borough of Englewood Cliffs. Today is April 23rd, 2018, and it is 6:35 p.m. May I have the roll call, please?
Mayor Kranjak,
Here.
Councilperson Zaversa,
Here.
E. Park, O.
Here.
McMorrow,
Here.
M. Park,
Here.
Wu,
Here.
CFO,
Here.
Borough Auditor,
Here.
and Municipal Clerk. Everyone's present except Councilwoman Park.
Okay, thank you. Please rise for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would you please remain standing for a moment of silence for resident Lillian Farrer, who passed away on Friday the 13th, which was also her 100th birthday. Thank you. Madam Clerk, would you please read the Open Public Meetings Act statement?
Adequate notice of this meeting was given to the press and posted as required. The day and time of this meeting is legally given as required by the Open Public Meetings Act. This notice is on file with the municipal clerk and posted on the bulletin board. Minutes of this meeting will be made available to the public upon the completion of typing and proofreading by the municipal clerk.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to open up to the public for their comments? Second. All in favor? Aye. If there's any member of the public who wishes to be heard, please raise your hand. Wait for me to recognize you. Come up to the microphone, state your name and address. Thank you. Yes.
Deborah Sabari, 106 Hollywood. I was just wondering if perhaps the structure, if it would be possible for the public to speak after discussion on the budget, since we're unable to really have any comments about the whole process. It used to be that the workshops, the residents were able to ask questions during the workshops. I know you've changed that, but what I'm asking is if we could open up again at the end of the workshop to answer any questions that the public might have.
Do you have any questions right now?
I can't. I don't have anything in front of me pertaining to this budget.
Okay. We'll consider that. Anybody else from the public? Can I have a motion to close the public portion? All in favor? Aye. Okay, thanks. Let's dispense with some housekeeping business. Resolution 2018-92, approve raffle license for the Englewood Cliffs Education Foundation. This appears on our special agenda as it was running late, and they asked us to do them a favor, which we are doing. So can I have a motion to approve that?
So moved. Who's second?
Carol. Can we vote?
Councilperson Zaversa,
Yes.
O.
Yes.
McMorrow, M. Park,
Yes.
Wu.
Yes. Okay. Let's turn our attention now to the 2018 budget workshop. I guess what we could do is, Fire Chief Dramones is here. Thank you for being here tonight. Would you want to just come up and sit with us? And Mr. O'Krepke's here also. Okay. Do you want to come up here and just sit with us? Tell us what's on your mind. So thank you for joining us tonight. We appreciate everything you and the department do for us, and we're hoping that the new pumper truck is working out.
It's working perfect.
Great.
So where do we start?
Let's start with, so let's go through your entire budget.
Okay.
If anybody has any questions while Chief Dramones is speaking, just Politely interrupted.
Under 2652, the conference meetings, requested $1,000. This is for mutual aid meeting that we host once a year. We usually expect 50 people. It's 8 towns that come in, and we meet. I don't have the exact date. Last year, we spent $770. Okay. Convention requested $10,500. Last year, we spent $10,227. That's the state fire convention that we go to. It includes breakfast, lunch, dinner for around 39 people, 40 people, depending on the year. And that's it.
Okay.
East Bergen Mutual Aid, that's the dues that we pay. It's $4,519. Education, we're asking $8,000. We spent $7,400 last year. We utilized a couple of private instructors. We utilize Bergenfield for live burn. We go up there, and a lot of our young kids have never been into a working fire. It's a good spot to be. This way, they can do it safely. With all the instructors there just standing around. Expenses, $500 are requested. This is usually Santa around town, other small things. We have the Japanese school coming over. We host them during the day. So $500 for that. The fire hose is $3,500. Last year we spent $3,455. That's just testing the hose, NFPA required. It's done every year. Even if we don't use the hose, it has to be done. A private outside concern comes. Hazmat, this is the county hazmat. We had a discussion at the mutual aid. They wanted us to pay $1,200 a year. We decided we're not paying it. They have to come anyway, so why pay it? And that was the whole mutual aid that said that. Oxygen Scott extinguishers. This is testing on our fire extinguishers, which we have about 30 of them. Replenishing if we use any. I requested $1,000. We used $500 last year.
I think you skipped this. Yeah, you skipped this one.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, miscellaneous is requested $2,000. We used $2,075 last year. That's for food and incidentals during the year. When we go to drills, when we go to a long fire. We were down Edgewater the other night. The guys came back, they were hungry, even though it was 12 o'clock at night. They traveled on their stomachs. Physical exams, this is also NFPA required for new people. They have to get their Scott masks and medical questionnaire answered, sent to Hackensack, and they decide if he should have a regular physical. NFPA required. Radio equipment, we're pretty good on radios. Radio maintenance contract or radio maintenance, we asked for $500. You never know what we're going to need for the rest of the year, for any part of the year. Respirator maintenance, again, we asked for $1,500. That's for any repairs of our Scott packs. We didn't use any last year, but you never know. And once you get these things repaired, it's not $1.25. They're pretty expensive to repair them. Supplies and equipment, $5,000. We used $3,300 last year, $3,366. We're in need of some incidental equipment, new nozzles. We need some 5-inch hose that failed last year, so we need to replace that. Turnout, $1,000. That's for any new member coming in. That'll cover just their coat and pants. That's it. Turnout, our protective gear, what we wear. Okay, vehicle repair, we requested $30,000. We spent $34,150 last year. The big hit was $9,900 on our engine when the shock absorbers went and the tactile system went down. So that had to be taken apart at the last minute.
Will that number come down now that you have a new?
I wish it would, but it won't, because we still have two pieces of equipment. The new one has all warranties, and that'll be good, but EC2 is 2004, EC truck is 1994, so it still needs repairs. In technology, $1,000, I've been requesting a new computer for the last 2 years. Mine, the motherboard went on the last snowstorm. Cameron put a couple Band-Aids on it, but that's about it.
I think he's looking into something new for you.
Okay. I don't have, I don't know what account this is, the stipends, ward and duty, blood clothing. I don't know what it is, but stipends, last year, this year, we asked for 51,000, we spent 50,470 last year. So far this year, up to March, we spent $19,500. For ward and duty, we requested 7,000, we spent down $5,190. For those that don't know about ward and duty, it's, when we have a snowstorm, we have to stay in the firehouse over anything past 5 hours, we pay for that. Clothing allowance, requested 24,000, we spent 19,000 last year. A couple of new kids might be awarded for this.
Just for the information of members of the public, how does the stipend work?
It's a monthly stipend. You have to have 35% on your calls, and it's paid every quarter. Okay. LoSAP, we spent $17,985 this year. That was submitted back in March, I think, or beginning of April. Okay? Any questions?
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions?
My wish list? We don't care about the wish list right now.
We'll take a wish list.
Wish list. Personal protective clothing. It's recommended by NFPA, and our Scott packs, also recommended by NFPA, have to be replaced, the clothing every 10 years, and Scott packs every 15 years. The first thing, God forbid, something happens in a fire, OSHA comes in and takes them away. They come right to the fire ground. If the guy's down, or if they go straight to the hospital, they'll take the Scott pack and the clothing and then investigate what went wrong with it, as far as is it too old, shouldn't have been there, or whatever. When was the last time it was tested, things like that. So, asking for 10, we've been doing this for the last couple of years, 10 pieces of protective jackets and trousers, which will come out to $25,703. That's state contract. And then on the Scott packs, there's 15 that have metal regulators. They're not allowed. We just found out last year that we had metal regulators on them. So that would be one of the things that, God forbid, something happens, we're in trouble. Originally requested 25, but 15 is what has to be replaced this year, if possible. The $7,900 each.
Just give a total.
No, I totaled the 25, which was 163,000, but
So 7,900 times 15?
accountants? No, not that fast?
118,500. Is that the one, Catherine was telling me that had expiration dates on it? Or something that had expiration dates on it? You know, she was...
There's no dates on any.
They have a life expectancy,
Yeah.
but not.
There's no standard date on it.
Oh.
No. The Scott pack, the Scott bottle itself comes with a date that was first put into service.
Okay.
And the Scott, the harness itself has no date at all, and it's inspected every year by our contractor. And that's when he came up with
So this
this.
is, due to your calculation, it's up for, it's definitely
Yes.
The personal protective clothing changes, what's the life
10.
expectancy?
10 years.
And the 10 pieces, that doesn't cover, it only covers, you only need 10.
Well, because we started back in 2007, every 10 years, and we do,
You replace,
yeah,
So not replacing them all at the same time.
Incrementally, he's been replaced.
we don't put them all at once.
So he's doing,
when was the last time, you said 2007?
no, every 10 years.
Well, 2007 was the first year that we did it. That's the first year that they required it, NFPA required it, and OSHA backed it up.
Every year you've been doing it.
Last three, 2007, 8, 9, I think 10 was the last year. We do 10 pieces of equipment. And again, it's, even if they're not used, they have to go. They have a date on it. They're the ones that have the date
That's
on
what
it.
I'm talking about.
Yeah. Any questions?
Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Have a good night.
Mayor, just for the record, I want to report Councilwoman Ellen Park arrived at 6:50 PM.
Wyatt.
Okay, let's move on. I know, our engineer is represented here. Do you want to take care of that first? So,
Yeah, I just want to, before I bring, well, while you're getting a chair, I can update them. Might as well get the chair. And I need help.
Give my to the chair here.
I'm gonna need help from, Chris. Okay, so, what I believe happened, Mike, correct
That's a
me
first,
if-
by the way. That's a first. It's rattle over.
I'm sorry.
That was the process. It worked well.
Carol, just turn the mic over. That's okay.
Okay, so, and I can only, I'm trying to piece things together, because I myself did not get the document that we're talking about. Apparently, there was a document that Mazer prepared, emailed it to Catherine, Lizette, and Mark, and that document was never given to any of us. In that document was a breakdown of their recommendations for portions of roads, and other issues that if we want to address or not address. While all the other issues may not be things that were extremely time-sensitive, obviously roads are. We did not go out to Riverside Cooperative this year. This is, obviously, it's a policy that's the first time that I've ever experienced this. That's a council decision, whether or not we are going to choose the route of, my other colleagues here who have experiences, as long as I do. It's a council decision to make a decision, at the end of the day, which roads we choose to do, and whether or not we choose to, enter into an agreement with Riverside Cooperative, or if, given the roads that we decide to do, we go outside of Riverside Cooperative and we, do a private, RFQ and go that route. Now, obviously, when you go private route, some of the costs are additional. And when you do Riverside Cooperative, those costs, engineering precisely, are more expensive, but there are reasons why you need to go outside of Riverside Cooperative, because, when you're in Riverside Cooperative, it's usually a straight mill and pave. And when you're outside of the Riverside Cooperative, it's usually more of a rehabilitation on the roads, or restructuring. Mike can go into more detail there. But at the end of the day, what's important here is, the policy is, and hopefully we've gotten this straightened out, it happened once before in 2010, I think it was the end of 2010 or in 11, where it didn't come back to the council. It has to come back to the council. It's a council decision, council votes, they decide how the money gets spent and where the money gets spent. So I think, in letting everybody know, none of us got this paper, other than, like I said, Mark, Catherine, and Lizette. And for whatever reason, it was not forwarded to. Correct, right. So what we need to do, and what I need Chris's help with at this point, we need to for a moment, Mayor, switch gears and understand what roads we want to do, what the council wants to spend the money on, whether it be in the Riverside. I immediately, and like I said, I only found out late Friday night when Catherine was leaving, called up Mike right away and Andy, who was in Hawaii, and he was gracious enough to communicate. There's still maybe the opportunity that if we want to get into the Riverside, we can get in tomorrow. We're waiting to find out. So if, just so happen we have the meeting tonight, so if we want to do that, let's talk. We can possibly get in. If we don't, we want to go the other route, then we don't. But we need to talk about that, because there's different monies that have to be attributed into different line items. And, sorry, Mayor, but,
That's fine.
okay? So I invited Mike.
Yeah, I wish we had this conversation 2 months ago.
I wish that too, all of us,
So,
but, so.
So, actually, Mike, just in the future, just copy me, thanks.
Understood.
Appreciate that.
Or at least the DPW chair of that committee, you know, which is, I think, William, so that there's never, you know, there's checks and balance for a reason. Things happen, you know.
Okay, so just to be clear, for any DPW item, I'm to copy the DPW chair?
Yeah, WWOO, Hayward Cliffs, New Jersey, NJ.org.
And Mayor, what he needs to explain also is because of the NJDOT grants, and when we have a grant, that money still has to be in the budget, and we fund it, and then we get the money back. So there's all these other items that are being juggled around, and we need to make sure that all these monies are in the right places, because what we don't want to happen is to fall short, and then we're stuck, and...
So it's a matter of that and also timing, because we're spending money.
Well, correct, because if you go outside the Riverside Cooperative and we don't go out to bid through them, or we're doing it privately, you technically can't go out to bid for the roads until the budget is passed, and then pass the 21-day time period after the budget is passed, and then have a capital ordinance. So there's a little more time involved. Okay, if you want to get it done.
So, thank you
Mike,
for that.
do you-
Appreciate that, Councilman McMorro. So, Mike, why don't you tell us what's suggested?
I asked them to make copies. I asked them to make 8 copies for everybody.
So I have copies of the memorandum that I've prepared, as well as the last engineering report that was submitted to the town, and I'm just going to
Thank you.
pass this around.
Sure.
I have my own copy.
Now, can I ask a question?
Sure.
The grant that we got, that
Which one?
Catherine referenced earlier,
Which one,
a month or two ago,
the NJDOT?
Right.
We still have to fund it. We have to fund it in the budget first, right?
That's the
Chris.
212,000.
That's what I was told.
that is, that all those monies are for this or doing it ourselves?
No, the NJDOT grant is totally separate.
Totally separate.
The DOT grant is enough to cover the charge. Even if you had already adopted your budget, you can do a chapter 159 to amend the budget later. So you would be able to do it. It would just be a separate resolution. If you need additional money on top of the grant, generally that comes from capital, so you would want to do that with the ordinance. What you were saying before about funding it and then getting the
Which is what we had to do
reimbursement
in 2016, remember?
later. So they changed the DOT process a little bit. You can get 75% up front now.
Yes, correct.
So that is helpful.
Mhm.
But generally, you would include it as part of your general capital budget if you wanted to do that, and then you could actually borrow that money while you wait for the money to come in. So
Right.
an ordinance can be done at any time, but you do have to wait the introduction, adoption, and the stop period.
Correct.
So, you don't have to wait for the budget to be adopted to do the bond ordinance, though.
Okay.
Real
Vivek? I think there were 2 different letters.
Yes, there are 2 different
There are
ones.
2 different, so who got what? Okay, so there's a...
They're both dated April
Yeah, they're
6th.
both-
One has a
one-
different title.
Number 1 is 2018 Riverside, and the other number 1 is Charlotte Place. Okay, what do you have? Okay, so you have a Riverside. I only have one Riverside. You have any more? What do you have? That's what I have, Riverside. I don't have a Charlotte. That's okay. We can share the Charlotte.
That is the engineering report.
That's fine. Okay.
Okay, so just looking at, I think the easiest item to address first would be the NJDOT grant. And if you turn all the way on the memo that, where the first item is the 2018 Riverside Cooperative, you turn to the last page, you'll see the fiscal year 2018 NJDOT in the Wood Club. That's referring to the state aid that was approved for $212,000. Mazer made an application to the DOT for 2 roads. So I'll just read this out. Mazer submitted the fiscal year 2018 municipal aid application to the NJDOT on October 10th, 2017. The application requested $308,000 and change for the construction cost, construction and inspection of Summit Street from Pershing Road to the end, and $301,000 and change for the construction cost, inspection and so on of Irving Avenue from Sylvan to Summit Street. On February 21st, 2018, Inglewood Cliffs received the fiscal year 2018 municipal aid grant award from the NJDOT in the amount of $212,000. Now, we always make, as a firm, as a practice, you always ask for more than you believe you will receive. You never know, sometimes you get more than you think you get, but you always want to take that tack. So we applied for $600,000 and change of projects, and the state provided $212,000. So what I suggest in order to make the project something that can be completed easily and to use the entire amount of the grant is to select one of the streets and just tailor it back such that you maximize, but using all the $212,000 available, but not spending much more money than the town has to. I mean, the town can, Inglewood Cliffs at their election can do the entire street, but at a minimum, I suggest setting aside $260,000 for this project to account for the full amount of the grant, as well as any non-participating items such as engineering, testing, police, in items like that. And that's what I suggest for this program. In setting aside $260,000, in my opinion, would be able to maximize the $212,000 available to Inglewood Cliffs.
So Mike, there's no stipulation that you have to do both streets, though? is
No.
No, not at all.
And you do not even have to do the entire. So you could pick one of the streets and do part of it, or as crazy as it sounds, you could do a portion of both, providing whatever project you select is within the limits of the original application.
Got it.
And I took a quick drive through both roads today. If I've had to weigh it, I would say Irving looks a little bit more banged up. I mean, it depends on how you look at it. I guess I would select Irving if we had to pick one. If you ask my opinion as an engineer, which is at the end, closer to its end of its useful life, I would say Irving.
Okay, so if we wanted to do Irving, what do you think? What do you think that will cost?
To do the entire street?
But with everything, also, with police and
With
engineering costs and everything else that we need, because we just need to know a real number so that Chris can.
the entire street, the engineering budget came in at 301. I would put in another 60,000 to account for all those items. I would put up, let's be safe, 75,000.
On top of the,
Top of the 312 or
On top of the 301
no, on top of the 301,
for budgeting purpose. Because my original number that I was discussing was, hey, if you wanted to just use the amount of the grant. Okay,
And those numbers that are without engineering and all the other costs, so, yeah. So it's 301 plus 75, and that would cover all the incidentals?
Right.
Okay, so then that's like 376 and change? 376, yeah. And then we'd have to budget the difference from the 212?
So that's 160.
Mike?
Yes.
Okay. Chris?
Presumably you would capitalize that, you would do in budget.
Yes. Yeah, right, I'm
Bond
just,
ordinance would be the 164,000 difference.
Yeah, actually do it for the whole thing, then you probably borrow the whole thing, then the grant comes in and pays off the debt. It's usually the better way to do it, right?
I get a lot more complaints about Summit, but I guess that's because I'm on that side.
You don't get anything.
And I guess that.
I get Johnson.
Yeah, I get it, yeah.
I
Match this, I
Right.
get it, yeah.
And, yeah, I know there may be more complaints with one, I just.
Or the mark on Irving, too, so.
yeah. Yeah, I've heard of complaints for Irving too. I mean, I've heard them both, so, that's why I said let him drive them. I don't really know.
They both have to get done eventually, so it's just whichever one.
Right, that's why we apply for both.
So then we have to add, so 174, 106, something like that, to the budget to do.
Not to the budget,
No, to the capital.
The cap.
bond ordinance,
Oh,
yeah.
my God.
So you would have 376,
Minus.
bond that,
Mine's
and then
212.
pay back the 212 when we get it.
Right.
So you'd be outstanding with 64.
Okay.
And why is it better to borrow from?
Because the state likes you to fund your ordinances, and in the case that, for whatever reason, you don't get a grant or the grant isn't received, they make you put it in the budget, which we don't want to do.
Oh, gotcha, yeah.
It's called unfunded grants. It was something that nobody seemed to ever worry about in the past, and all of a sudden they're very concerned about it. And it's a tough item to pick up in your budget because it's a new item.
Okay, so Chris, you have that marked for us in capital then?
376,000.
And Chris has actually been diligent to collect the grants. That has been outstanding. We talked about that at the beginning of the budget process. Because it does come up during the budget review, which you're under this year, state budget review.
Okay, Mike,
Okay.
you could go on to the other roads.
So continue on,
Yeah.
if you, now that is addressed, if everyone would flip to the first page of that same memorandum, you'll see, under number 3, you'll see item A, and then which is Lynn Drive, and if you flip the sheet, you'll see items E and F. The reason why those streets in particular are of interest is because those are standard mill and pave roads. Those are projects that, can be completed under the Riverside Cooperative or under a standard type of a contract. And the other roads that were outlined in item number 3 are roads that require significant reconstruction in one way or the other. They require more robust engineering or more drainage improvements, additional construction, all of which don't lend themselves to the Riverside Cooperative. As Ms. McMorrow outlined earlier, there was a discussion about not joining the Riverside Cooperative. We have reached out, we as Mazer, we administer the Riverside Cooperative for the municipality that runs it. This year is Northvale. So we've reached out to them, and we believe that Inglewood Cliffs could be added into it. We're just confirming, and we should know tomorrow. Regardless of which direction these other road projects go into, I have estimates shown there for Lynn Drive for the entire length. Item A, I have it 250,000. Item E, Anderson Avenue, I have it 125,000. And item F, at Ellington Place, I have it $75,000.
That's without the incidentals, including engineering.
That includes engineering, bidding.
Oh, it does?
Everything.
That is a more, that is a more inclusive estimate than the DOT estimate. The DOT estimate is purely for the construction. This includes, these estimates are all in for a standard mill and pave project. So if these numbers were set aside, for one or all three of them, or any combination between, the town would be able to address these roads either with the Riverside Cooperative or with going out to bid.
Yeah, but if you went out to bid on those 3 roads, those numbers are going to be the same, or the engineering costs are going to be higher?
The actual engineering costs would, in terms of the design, would be a little higher. But in terms of, if you're asking me for an estimate, I would still stick with these estimates, because we don't have bids. Until you have bids, that's when you have accurate numbers.
Right, but for sure, these are roads that do not need any structural
Correct.
repair.
Correct.
So what is the downside to doing this through the Riverside Cooperative to a straight mill?
The only downside is you have a little less control with the Riverside Cooperative. In past years, sometimes the Riverside Cooperative may not get the project done within a certain time frame. For example, we have some municipalities that they mandate, hey, these roads must be completed before Labor Day, before school, for whatever reason. And then we have other municipalities that, hey, we don't care. It's fine, we can do them just as long as it's done before the cold sets in. So so that extra cost that you're talking about gives you a little bit more control. And without it, if it's not a service that is important to Inglewood Cliffs, then by all means, I would suggest going with the Riverside
And
Cooperative.
save the money. Okay, so that's a discussion that, all of you need to, myself included, decide, do we want to save that little bit of, it adds up, a little bit here, a little bit there. Why not?
What are we talking about in terms of savings? Just a ballpark?
$8,000 in terms of the actual construction. And listen, if you do one road, that's significant. If you're doing all 3 roads, it's not in terms of percentage, but it's something to consider. Again, on the actual cost, these estimates wouldn't change.
If we have no rush to, no time restrictions in doing the road, we're going to participate with the...
Yeah, why not save the money? That's what I was saying, yeah.
I agree.
So you'll let everybody know?
If we get any money.
I believe we will, and we should know tomorrow, for sure. And once we find out for certain is when I'll send something in writing. I don't want to send anything in writing until then.
No.
Makes sense to me, if the road's paved anyway.
Yeah.
Get all the streets.
The only other thing that we should consider is whether there's going to be utility work on those streets, so that the utilities can pay for it, we have our cooperative money.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
You guys check that.
We reach out to them. Once it's determined, then absolutely we reach out to them, and maybe some of the roads we may hold off on. So maybe if there's a road that that there's going to be a project on, hold off on it, do it the next year, and use that money to get that.
Chris, can you just check with Mark now if he has a list?
I didn't hear the mayor's question.
I was just asking whether or not any utility work is being done on these streets, in which case we get the utilities to pay for that, and it's like the money and something else with it.
Michael, I think last year, I remember the only drawback with Riverside was that the timing, it was not in our control at all. I think there was some complaints about, them just rolling in and doing it at times that were, not convenient for us.
Mhm.
Is there any way to improve on that at all in terms of any control over that?
Not with the Riverside Cooperative. It's kind of, the best way I could say is, you're getting the discount price by going in with the group. And the downside with going in with the group is the lack of control. That is the one downside, without a doubt.
Well, you're saying they started at bad hours, or just like the length of the work they did?
Yeah, I think the days that they did it was, we might have had something going on. I apologize for the exact
I
reason.
understand.
They started a little late last
Yeah.
year, later than ever before that I've ever seen. They
There wasn't
started,
any notification.
No, they showed up.
They just showed up, exactly. I think that was the...
That was part of it as well. Regardless of what was discussed in the pre-con, I
Yeah.
went to both pre-cons, and I have everything in writing, but it was just, they just showed up one day. That was literally what they did.
They gave no time to police or DPW.
Yes.
Yeah, I can see that being a problem, like when the drive was close to the park.
The amendment
Anderson, but that shouldn't be a problem.
Ellington shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's good, because it's near the park, this way.
Okay, and that is, and those are all the roads that, were discussed, over the past few months, in their entirety, and if anyone has any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them.
Well, I do have a question for Chris. Do we know how much we put in the capital budget for roads?
100,000 is what's in there for the capital improvement fund. We didn't do an ordinance yet. 100,000 gets us 2 million. Yeah, that's
100,000 gets us 2 million.
5%.
Okay. And do we have any money left over in any of the old ordinances from last year on roads?
We do. I don't have the accounting in front of me.
Okay.
There is money left over.
All right. Can you get me that?
Sure.
Okay. So, I guess we need to talk about like how many roads we want to do and,
We're just waiting for gas and 60.
that all goes into the equation.
Is that is the list?
That's on the paper we just got, it's on here, so. We can say whatever we want,
Yeah.
at least to move some of those to the riverside. My position always, no matter what, going forward, always put into the riverside cooperative. It doesn't cost you anything to show it. And if you don't want it, then you don't use it. But at least you protect yourself that you're in it.
Is there a deadline?
There is a deadline, and we missed one. He's going to be getting, technically, it should have been done already. But like I said, because of the confusion with none of us got the papers, you do it by resolution. So we would have to have the resolution then at the May meeting.
When is the deadline?
He's going to find out he can get
I'm
us
going
the
to find out all
power.
the information.
Yeah.
Like I said, tomorrow I should have all the deadlines and the appropriate information that would have to be added in.
Okay. And the only other thing that I had found out, I think Mike, you could mention it, Summit, the other part of Summit, I know they were looking to work with Englewood. Englewood is not able to do it with us this year. They said possibly next year, their budget, they're already locked
They're in
in.
a budget crisis, so that was
Yeah.
one of the roads that was outlined.
That was on
in
here,
this
so we can't do
analysis.
Summit this year, but keep it on your list for next year because you need to work with Englewood.
How have we generally split that cost with Englewood in the past, that street?
That was before my time, but I can't think.
We've always paid for it. We haven't done a great job, but we have always paid for that little piece of Summit.
Not really there.
And whenever there is potholes, we fill it.
Yeah, that part's about
I mean, I can suggest how I would do
We're
it.
waiting for them this year, we've always been in the past. We know that's going to be a result.
Yeah.
No.
They didn't pay for the good use, and that's...
Right.
Council, as of March 21st, we had 120,000 left over.
120,000 left over?
Yeah, Catherine had asked me that same
March 21st?
question, March 21st, so I just opened up the email. I don't think that,
Yeah, that's a street almost, right? Yeah.
I don't think that anything's been charged since then, so it's probably pretty close.
What do we have on
All
here?
right, thank you very much, everyone.
Michael, I appreciate you, I know you weren't feeling well this weekend,
Oh, no.
working through this with me, thank you.
No problem. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you.
I don't have to.
Now that everybody's watching, right?
All right, have a good night.
Bye. So that's good that we have 120,000 left, but that's almost, I mean,
So today, the Public Safety Committee and the mayor, we had a meeting with the chief of police as well as the two captains, Captain Regan and Captain Murphy, to go through the budget. Just to summarize, high level, the police budget is increasing by 7% from last year to this year, from $4.51 million to $4.84 million. which includes salary and wages, overhead and expenses, as well as terminal leave. Of that 7% increase, 4% is attributable to salary and wages. Most of the salary and wages are governed by the collective bargaining agreement. Chris Battaglia was kind enough to send over each employee within the police department, and I know Chris is always doing good work, but I just looked through the numbers, and, you know, it matches exactly what's in the agreement. So the 4% increase, in that 4% increase is $250,000 of overtime. The police chief has looked at that today and did not have any comments regarding that.
My position is that even that number is high. The council obviously can do what it wants. I've really spent several months now on a daily basis looking at how overtime is occurred in the police department, and I sincerely and humbly and really professionally that we can do much better than what we're doing. Last year it was 352.
Yep.
It's a matter of using what you have in terms of resources, and allocating that properly to your scheduling process. And suggestions have been made, observations have been made, but we still have a problem in terms of how human resources officers are being allocated to shifts and squads, and we can actually improve public safety in a lot of ways as well with what we have. There's some resistance to doing things differently. Some things have started getting changed, and some license plate readers have been installed around town as some choke points, where you can see what's coming in, what's coming out, before and after a crime. So my position is that it shouldn't be higher than $150,000, and more effort needs to be spent doing that scheduling work rather than some of the other things that we read about in the newspaper that waste a lot of time and assets. Again, you know, the council is free to come up with some recommendations, but mine is that no one has justified a number higher than 150 to me. Opportunities were provided to do that. I'm listening. I can change my mind as well, but if somebody needs to make a coherent argument that it should be higher than 150,000. And I haven't heard that yet.
Yeah. Adding to what the mayor is saying, as police commissioner, number one, I appreciate the mayor's help in working together with me. He's sent many emails corresponding with the chief. Anytime there's any overtime expended, we've been looking at the details of that, and the mayor's been taking the lead on that, so appreciate the help on that. With respect to the $150,000, my position on overtime is that up to today, including last year, we've asked the same question, which is, what does it take to reduce the overtime? If we hire one officer, roughly how is the overtime going to be affected? Or two officers, how is the overtime going to be affected? And I state for the record again, we have not gotten any response on that. And, you know, at the end of the day, the day-to-day operations of the police department is done by our police chief, and, you know, it's very hard for us to assess that, and we hope that, you know, we can get a firm answer on that. And like I said, to date, we have not gotten anything.
One of the questions asked today was, other than emergencies, how would we eliminate all overtime? What would you need? What would you need? And I didn't think that was such a dumbfounding question, but it turned out that we didn't get an answer even then. So again, I think that the technology is there, the resources are there, the budget is there, personnel are there. They just need to be assembled in the right fashion to cut out the overtime. We have to balance a lot of the borough's budget here. And that's not even taking into account all the litigations that come out of that police department, which is substantial. And we spend a lot of borough resources on that, unnecessarily. And then even while people are at work, as I mentioned to the chief today, they're working on things other than work in terms of their litigations. We've seen it all. We've seen the discovery. We can do better. And I think the residents of this town should be demanding that we do better. And we as a council can't just keep blessing inefficiencies and economics that don't work. So appreciate your effort, and Mark Park was also there today as well.
So going down, last year we spent 366,000. 300,000, yeah. We were up 66,000. Further down, as we move forward, the overhead and expenses for the police department increased by 111,000 from last year to this year, a 2.4% increase. Most of the 111,000 is attributable to a request for new police vehicles that are not able to be put into capital. We asked the police chief today if we can have sort of a standard number of miles that cars go through so that it's not arbitrarily chosen as to when vehicles need to be auctioned off. We did not, I'm going to keep following up with our police chief on that. We do have a list of all the vehicles and exactly how much mileage they have on them. Good question, Carol. I have the list right here. You're happy to look at it.
There's two numbers, how many we have and how many we use.
Yeah, the official number, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. I count 17, Carol. Here's the list.
Some of those are slated for auction.
Correct. And relative to terminal leave, that is, pretty much, there's not much room for, all those are governed by agreements we have with our former employees. And that's it. Thank you. Anybody have any questions I can address? We do. Last year we were provided a chart, and I can get an updated one, Gloria, which had exactly a breakdown by category of overtime. So they do keep that number, and I'll.
Some of the towns have 85 boards, so
Sure, it's a good suggestion. I'm not sure. Okay, thank you.
amount during the 7% increase?
Yeah, the 7% increase is $331,462.
We brought up a lot of that big time.
We did, I know, that was brought up.
Pretty long, actually.
Remember?
I do. I always said it was a good idea.
She brought that up, yeah.
One more.
I'm sorry. You probably told I don't want to get to court, but yeah, it's unfair thing to think about.
On the capital side, there weren't really any urgent requests on behalf of the chief. Automatic license plate reader, we have one currently in the department, and he requested to buy another 2. That one there, we didn't have, we did not have too many issues with. Relative to the lockers, that was already in the budget, capital budget for last year. The police garage, light towers, tents for emergencies, those are not things the chief needs immediately, and he's okay if we have those pushed off. We did talk about the speed detectors or the radars. We have 5 of those currently. I personally really like those because I think on key streets that we have speeding on, they're pretty effective. He doesn't need any more at the moment. He's going to continue to rotate them among troublesome streets like Pershing and Chestnut. We did, and he did buy them. Yes. They're out. He mentioned there's one permanent one, which is on Johnson Avenue by the field, and then we have 5 total right now. Yeah, and I think he said we had 2 originally, and we bought 3.
I'm sorry. You had everything there, I thought that. Okay.
And we also we need to, yeah, no problem.
That was great. Money funded.
Yeah, the other thing we're following up on is just, we just have to make sure on the lockers, I think there was a question of whether the asbestos test that went through, Michael already left, but making sure the result of that was negative before we do anything with the lockers.
Independent companies did that.
Yeah, okay, it wasn't major.
I think
They have the results.
And we spoke about speed bumps and speed humps and things like that, and the chief's view is those things, a lot of residents complain about those trucks going over them, making a lot of noise, and, but at the end of the day, we emphasize that we have residents coming in time and time again into our council meetings complaining about the speeding, so either, we need manned vehicles there, issuing summonses, something needs to be done. Yeah. Yeah.
They had it, what street neighborhood did they have it?
Booth and Broad.
Say it?
Booth had it, Broad had
No,
it.
no, I'm sorry, they were by the,
By the temple.
by the temple, no, by the temple. I'm gonna tell you, every time you go by, you have to slow down. You have no choice, so.
So one of the other things I asked Mark Neville to look into, and the chief and whoever's in charge of traffic, is that we need to harden some of the assets that we have where pedestrians are and people are present. For example, Johnson Field has a road leading right up to the snack bar. There needs to be a bollard there or some gate to harden that for safety reasons. And I asked Mark to look into pricing different options there, and also advise, because I'm not as familiar with the rest of the town and where people gather in terms of other parks, but in this day and age, we should be thinking proactively to make sure that people are safe, and I'm surprised it's taken so long for us to focus on this, but we're doing that, and we're going to get some pricing on that. So it may be as simple as doing, retractable bollards or a gate that opens and closes and will only permit law enforcement, ambulances, and DPW vehicles in. But we do need to look at that.
I mean, this weekend we had so much activity at the field. There was a church group there playing volleyball and baseball, and also tennis tournament going on. There were
I saw
people.
someone drive up to the snack bar because they had to walk their dog, and it was raining out, so they wanted to be close to the grass, and they drove all the way up to the picnic tables. I don't know where they were from, but bizarre. So you see that, and you start thinking about what the worst case. So.
Yeah.
I wanted to that one.
That's a good idea.
Anything else? Anybody? Have a motion to adjourn?
No.
Are we done?
They didn't start yet.
Oh, sorry. I've got public safety chair police. That's you. And then we're done. You said a lot already, didn't you?
That was the last.
You guys were here for
All right.
That's what I thought we were here for.
All right.
You know what?
All right.
I have a question.
Yeah, that's fine. Let's go ahead. It's fine. I thought we were making so much great progress here.
Well, we know we have made a lot, we're on a roll.
All right. Keep our roll going, guys.
I didn't see this before we got here, so I have Which one of you is gonna explain this?
That's good. There you go. I like that.
I think that's not, I think it's is that only one bag?
I don't know.
You do it.
Let me ask you, you can take this along.
Wait, you need one? I made copies. Didn't you get this via email?
No, I didn't get this. Did you get this?
No, this is the first time.
First time too.
I believe.
I think
Yeah, she sent it out to everyone via email.
Okay, can you please,
Oh, let the record. Okay, you got it.
either Chris or...
So I'll start.
Are you coming back, Warren?
I can't come back to that. I talked to
All right.
Councilman.
Got it.
Okay, so as you all know, the process started in January. Chris, myself, and Catherine, and a couple of people from my office, put together various versions of the budget document based upon feedback from you all. And then from the budget document, we then kind of condense it to this sheet. In the upper right-hand corner, you'll see it says ineligible, you're ineligible for self-exam. So that means the state is going to do a budget review this year, which is harmless, just something that the state does every third year, just to make sure everybody is staying within the statutes, et cetera. And it's real simple. We're projecting an 18 column based, again, all this was as of April 19th. And based upon feedback from Chris and Catherine, those are the projected 18 numbers. Versus the 17 numbers, which is in the next column, and then the right-hand column is the variance. This particular version is showing an amount to be raised by taxation of just under $1 million.
Where are you? I'm sorry.
Just on the front page.
1 million.
Oh, the amount to be raised by taxation is showing an increase of just under $1 million. The amount to be raised by taxation is the total appropriations, what you plan on spending, which is the $17.9 million, less the anticipated revenues of $4.3 million. The difference is the amount to be raised by taxation, and that increase here is, like I said, is showing just under $1 million. And then on the right-hand column, you could see some of the specific line items that have changed, either for the positive or the negative. We start on the revenue section. You'll see that the biggest decrease in revenues is the amount available from general capital fund balance, which, as you know, we've been using or utilizing a little each year. On the appropriation side, I sorted them in order just to get a feel for what the highest increase was, and then, going down from there. So you can see almost every line item has a significant increase, and then it levels down to accumulated absence, which we're still using the same 50,000, the library the same 180, and the capital improvement fund the same 100. The only item on here that is discretionary on the revenue side is surplus. That obviously is discretionary. You can always go a little higher, a little lower. We've had many conversations about utilization of surplus. And then on the appropriation side, the third one from the bottom, the reserve for uncollected taxes, has a little asterisk next to it. The actual amount is more like $672,000. We always, again, to be a little conservative, try to go a little higher. As you can see, last year we went to 816, this year we're at 702. So there's a little leeway there, not much, not as much as there used to be. So let's call it anywhere from 675 to 702. But other than that, all the projected 2018 numbers on the appropriations comes from, your meetings with the department heads, and again, the feedback to us. The actual minimum reserve for uncollected taxes is $625,000. So you have about $75,000 worth of play in that number.
The reason for that play also was because we did settle a bunch of appeals last year that we had multi-year credits on. So a lot of that is credits following, carrying over from last year's appeals.
The third page, which is, kind of looks like this with a lot of the percentages on it, breaks down the amount to be raised by taxation. As I said before, it just kind of carries over. Then I run into a quick cap calculation, make sure you're, that you fit within the appropriation cap. And then we have a levy cap calculation, which are actually over the levy cap, but you have some banking. You have $800,000 in banking. So we're still okay on the levy cap. And then you break down the county taxes, county open school, open space, local district school, and then the municipal taxes. And then I show the tax rates, a tax point, the average home, including vacant property. There's an average home without vacant property and with vacant property, obviously. And there's different arguments for using both. And then it breaks down how your tax bill on the average home breaks down. So in the 2018 column, on a home assessed at $1,318,000, they'd be paying a little under $3,000 in county taxes. Local school taxes represent about $5,274, and the local taxes would be $5,254. Again, on an average home, based upon these projected 18 numbers, which are nothing more than that.
Can I ask a question? So, the general capital fund balance on page 1, 400,797 was the actual amount used.
Last year, yes.
Last year, and this year, the 200 is a result of us not having as much.
Well, there's a lot that goes into that. It's a very good question. It's like a fund. Before, we were discussing capital ordinances. What happens is capital ordinances become stale. You decide to do any project, and over time, money gets charged against that project. There comes to a point in time where Chris and I will sit down and we'll go through the list, and we'll say, look, you've had this project open for 9 years, you haven't spent against it in the last 3 years, let's cancel it. When you cancel it, it goes into a pot called capital fund balance. And I always feel like I'm teaching when I'm here. So it's just, everything is a story, it's complicated, right? So there's this pot, capital fund balance. Now, you could obviously use it all in 1 year, but then you have nothing for the following year. So I always try to preach, utilization, meaning 2 years, 3 years, whatever. So now we're getting down, that pot is now getting down, but we can revisit the new stale ordinances and try to add to that pot. So it's kind of a replenishment, almost very similar to the way surplus works. Now, surplus works because there's monies that you raise from the public that you haven't spent, basically. So it works almost the same way. One is for capital projects, and surplus is more for current funds.
Yeah, because on the revenue side, we're already kind of 400,000 in the hole, without even looking at any expense increase, right?
Yep.
And then on the expense side...
Except, excuse me, there's one thing. Go ahead, Chris. You just have to ignore the 188, only because that was like a we were talking before about adding a grant later in the budget, so that's an in and out. So it really wasn't a loss of a revenue, because it was also a loss of an expenditure down below. See, it's got a wash here, chapter 159.
I do, yeah.
Yeah, so it's almost like an in and out. So
Okay, so
I wouldn't really consider that a loss of revenue. Really, the only revenue that went down, projected again, is the sewer hookup, a little bit in recreation fees, and the big one, which is the capital fund balance.
Yeah, the other big revenue number is this delinquent taxes. That's the collection of delinquent. We got 331 in. And is that run at a pretty stable rate as a percentage of total taxes? Is it a number that fluctuates a lot?
Well, we'd hope not, but your collection rate here historically has been pretty good. The only thing you could really ever do did you ever look into an accelerated tax sale? No.
I don't think
Yeah, there's something called an accelerated tax sale, where if you didn't really want to deal with the delinquent taxes, you could basically have a pre-sale a little bit sooner, before the end of the year, which kind of gets anybody who,
Anybody can get, yeah.
anybody who's on the fence about paying, believe me, they'll pay to avoid that.
They'll get a tax sale notice the day after the grace period in November, though. So November, the taxes are due November 1st.
Yeah.
You get a 10-day grace period. November 11th, they're getting a letter saying you're going to tax sale.
Yeah.
So it is harsh in year one when they're not used to it.
Right, exactly. You're going to get a lot of phone calls?
Yeah, you will get a lot of phone calls in year one.
On the other hand, to answer your question, delinquent taxes sometimes can't be helped. I mean, there's certain people that they're not paying because they don't want to. They're paying because they can't. And that's never going to change. So you're always going to have a certain portion.
Is our tax collection rate dipped? It's usually like 98%.
Yeah, it's usually pretty good.
Yeah, it's been pretty steady.
Yeah.
Okay, so it hasn't changed.
No. And it's very unusual to see a low tax collection rate, especially with the amount of appeals that you have, because normally they have to pay in order to appeal. So the appeals actually create, a current tax. Also, too, with tax reform this year, a lot of people thought it was beneficial to prepay. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, so that kind of brought a lot of taxpayers in. It doesn't really help your rate, but it brought the bodies through the door, yeah. Or the checks through the window, whatever way you want to look at it.
What were the numbers last year?
For
The average cost per house?
The average home was $1,274,080 last year. And you want me to break down the taxes on that? Okay.
Stop right there. Third page.
Yeah.
Third page.
The
At the bottom. It's this one, right there at the bottom. 12.7 last year, 13.6.
That's the average home with vacants.
No, I just want to know what's the dollar per house, is that the 504?
No. The total taxes on the average home last year were $12,717,000. And the local was $4,750. The school was $5,008. And the county, between open space and the regular, was roughly $3,000.
So what was that per household now?
$12,717.
Yeah, so $928.
That was last year's?
Last
You're
year.
saying between 17 and 16.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, I thought that was an easy question.
Oh, well, I don't have that much. I don't have it with me.
We don't know.
Well, we know, I just don't have it with me. I don't know what this is.
I just wanted to, are we saying that there's a $9?
$50 this year. I recall 50.
I just want to make, I don't have my glasses. Are we saying a $929 tax increase?
That's what this is showing.
Yeah.
Am I the only one here that has an issue with this, or?
It's like, it's that 7%. Am I right? I'm not really good at math, but I could tell.
I'm not accepting that.
Yeah.
That's not acceptable
No, it's
to
not.
the residents of this community. Now,
Just remember, they're not my numbers.
Uh,
I don't have a vote.
for the record, and because there's a video going, I have had no input in this budget at all.
Can we find some money somewhere?
That's the goal. That's what we have budgeted.
Yeah, well, we're gonna have to start having a lot of budget meetings, because, I mean, what's your opinion on this?
Yeah, that's a lot.
You?
Not acceptable.
Not acceptable. Ed?
I don't have an average price home apparently, because I help a lot more than that, so. Yeah, it's not acceptable.
Thank you.
Any of us, here, we all pay that.
Yeah, I'm hearing it was silent, I guess it was shocking.
Shocking, I'm trying to absorb the,
Okay, so
It's that little number at the bottom right corner.
that's it. Everybody's trying to let that sink in.
We could do better than this.
we have to do better than this, right? So we have to figure out, the next question is how, and, the next question is how. So I think that, as a group together, you know, we just have to put our thinking caps on and figure out what we have.
And let me give you some parameters, because I think this is important.
Okay.
It's very important to realize that for every 50,000 of dollars that it's printed right up here, just so that if you want to see, for every 50,000 increase and decrease in appropriation will result in an decrease on the average house of $19 to the local rate. So to give you an example, we took $100,000 off a line item, and it worked out almost to the penny. It dropped it down to $465 on the average house at the local rate, which is the only thing you have control over is the local rate, right? So it doesn't do us any good to talk about the county and the school at today's meeting, right? So it's $100,000. So I guess what I'm trying to get at, you need to cut significant dollars to make an impact, because 50,000 is only making a $19 difference. So 100,000 is only making a $38 difference.
Yeah.
So we need to find $2.4 million out of this budget.
How much? $2.4 million.
Last year, the number I found in the document was 106 for the local.
It was 6, and that was with or without that, go to the bottom. There's
We're at 504.
there's some things here.
So that's a big.
Take 928 divided by 19 times
Ooh,
50.
I lost it. I almost had it. No, I went too far. No, the very bottom, no, this very bottom is already went lower.
If you don't mind me, obviously, Paul's done a good job of ordering the appropriations and police salary and wages. He's ordered them in terms of differential. So as you can see there, police salary and wage is at the top of the list as it pertains to the differential between last year and this year. And some of it, again, is uncontrollable. But overtime is something that is controlled. Right now, what's in there is $250. Right? The mayor suggested earlier there should be no reason why, and I agree, that we can't control it to $150. How does everybody feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, if we can make it 0, that would be great, but, we do our best to...
Well, last year we had 300, we went to 366, so a number is just a number unless it's going to be a hearing.
It is, yes.
So while I'm in total agreement with, I think right now, all propositions have to be looked at. I mean, I
Yeah, so I
think
think
our residents expect us to do a better job than to have an increase of 106 to to go to 504. We have to really just start sitting down.
Then look at the details of the numbers.
And look at these details.
For statutory expenditures, there's 160 there. That's a very general name.
Where are you?
Line 2.
Yeah, gotcha, okay.
Yeah, but that also means it's not discretionary.
So what I would say that everything's on the table except things that are contractual obligations or statutory obligations.
Or,
No, it can't be a
Legal
third.
fees.
It can't be a third.
there's gotta be a third.
Contractual or statutory, yeah.
Well, if people just stop suing in this town, we could save a lot of money, but, you know, that's all
But-
they do.
One of the things I just want to reinforce, the obvious, we're at the end of April, we're going into May, you haven't introduced yet. Not only do you have to introduce, you have to adopt, and Chris has to pay bills. So we're in this quandary where if you're not going to introduce at the next meeting, you might have cash flow issues, right? So we got to get a decision made. Does Chris do estimated tax bills? So there's a lot that goes into this, but I think you're all making excellent points, which isn't really going to help the situation, is that a lot of these things are not discretionary. Now, legal fees, for example, I know Catherine she was adamant that she increased it to 400,000, and Chris can tell you, as of April, we're at...
No, I don't have that number.
I know, but half of that?
So here's as of April, we have paid more than that, not more than that, but more than half of that through April, but a lot of it were bills from 2017. We're not getting billed for months later. So some of our, between the legal fees that are actually getting paid to attorneys and the amounts that are getting paid to, the name of the company's QBE, I don't know exactly what.
Correct, yes. Summit Risk, they bill quarterly, which we've asked them to please submit their bills monthly.
So between those two, I mean, we paid 200,000, easy.
And we're only in April.
Why do they submit the bills so late in 2017? I mean, that's just, that would have been something as a council that would have been helpful to know, hey, we had X amount of, and I don't know what it is, hundreds of thousands of dollars that they haven't billed us for. That's not something that we know to then
No one did. Exactly, no one did. That's the problem, and then...
It's like so unacceptable. How do you plan and run a business that way? You can't. When you have months of expenditures that are not being submitted timely. And there's still legal expenses or expenses, right? So, we have a couple of issues here. I think this reiterates my point of having to get an administrator in here ASAP. The personnel committee have been very cooperative, working together. Tomorrow we have our third meeting, on that. So, and we have deadlines to meet. So we're going to have to look at what our deadline is, and what we need to introduce. And guys, in all sincerity, however many times we have to meet, and the majority of us to get together, and we have to make every effort possible to get this down to an acceptable number. It's just, we have to do our due diligence, and we have to work at this. Now, please, no, go ahead.
You said most of this is contractual or statutory, so can we just mark the ones that can,
Yes.
have room to change?
Yes, right. So like if we start with police hours and wages, obviously there was some discussion earlier today, so we can kind of skip past that one. The statute,
There is this contract?
There's some room in there, yes.
The overtime would be the only...
Right.
So this salary wages are always...
Yeah, that's a separate line item, right?
Which one? The overtime is in the salary and wage.
Oh, it is?
So that is,
Okay.
you have some say over that.
Oh, that's outside
I think the wages go down.
it might be easier maybe if I just tell you what you probably can't touch.
Okay.
So you really can't touch statutory expenditures. Those are things like your pension obligation, Social Security, or any kind of, governmental monies that are owed, which really is kind of untouchable. Tax appeals, I think that's a very conservative number. We're putting in a bare minimum with the plan that eventually we will have to go to the local finance board again and do a bond ordinance. We had a meeting with Steve Rogut where he laid out a plan. The state does like to see something in there.
Is it 200? Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
300.
It's 300. I don't know why yours isn't clear.
Because I put draft on it.
Oh, okay. Oh, we did actually, yeah, that's a 3.
So we can't touch that at all?
Well, again, you can bring that down to 0. However, that might shoot us in the foot down the road
We're
if
not
we go to
saying-
local
What
finance
is an
board.
acceptable professional?
Steve Rogut's professional opinion is
Thank you.
300,000. That's where the number came from Steve Rogut.
Usually there's a range.
The purpose for that number, the purpose was that he wanted to start to fund what we needed, because we haven't really been doing that.
Right.
So,
Showing good faith to the state as well, that when we go down, if you put 0 in and you go down, they're saying, well, you didn't put anything in. Right.
Do we do 200,000, or is that gonna?
The 300 encompasses appeals that we know we're going to have to pay this year, but it's also putting money towards, what was it, 1.2 million, I don't remember the dollar amount, I think it's a $1.2 million appeal that we know is coming. So, the smaller that number, the more the state is going to say, hey, wait a second, you knew this was coming down the pipe,
Right.
you're coming now to us for permission to raise this over a number of years, and they're going to say no. And specifically with tax appeals, they are very strict now.
And I think his feeling was, even if you cut that 100 and maybe you can get away with it, then they're gonna they potentially may not let us do the big one, which is a bigger concern, which
But I
would be
mean,
over $1 million.
is 50 an acceptable, responsible? I mean, one of the two of you can call Steve.
So instead of 300, make it 250.
I'm not saying to do anything.
Well,
I
I can tell you right now, I think if you went to 275 or 250, I don't think that's something that Steve would say, is unacceptable.
Okay.
I think we started at 400.
Yeah, we actually
We started higher because, we're looking at this settlement coming next year.
Right.
So, I mean,
But right now, we're looking for any little wiggle room anywhere, so 50 if we can pick up.
but you're going to have to raise it, whether it's this year or next, you're going to have to raise it. So it's just a
Right.
matter of how many years you're going to split it over. And if they make the decision that you did not do a good enough job preserving money for it, they'll just not let you spread it over that many years.
I understand that. You have to wait until,
I guess the question is in Steve's opinion, when we were having this conversation, was 50,000 worth of risk of potentially losing out on the bigger
if there is a risk,
Yeah.
I'm just asking
Yeah.
if there is a risk, if somebody could just make the phone call.
Something, I'll actually talk to Steve tomorrow on that.
Thank you.
Something that we can't touch is debt service, which is the next item. Obviously, that's the principal and interest due on your debt. There's nothing we can do about it.
Is that the things that were bonded last year that have added to the debt service? It's not the items we had on capital this year, right? It's the capital items from last year.
And prior,
And prior.
including tax appeals from other years.
So 123,000, call it at what's the interest rate roughly? 5%?
Well, no, much lower than that, but the interest rates have gone up on the notes dramatically.
Okay.
They've almost doubled in the last, as you probably know from watching the news, interest rates
Yeah.
keep on going up. And we were riding historic lows, so the average, I would say, is about 2.5.
So my question is, it's 2% and you have a $123,000 increase in the service of it, wouldn't that roughly imply almost $5 million of extra capital?
Well, some of that service is principal. In the type of accounting we use in New Jersey,
Yeah.
we actually include the principal payment as an expense. In governmental, GAAP accounting, you don't do that. So that debt service increase could be, I don't have it in front of me, but it could certainly be a bump up in a principal payment as well, or a combination of both. But I would say the only true interest cost increase is on the notes this year, and they're going to go up again next year.
So that one's already fixed.
Yeah, and that is going to be another issue if you're thinking next year. 2019, not 18, is the cost on debt. It's just going to continue to go higher.
All of our debt is, none of our debt is fixed, right?
Some of the bonds are. Yeah, you have some bonds, right? Yeah. It's a mix. It's a mix. Again, the reason why a lot of municipalities stated notes is the rates were so ridiculously low for such a long period of time that everyone got accustomed to it.
Should we try to make more of it fixed right now with the rates being so low and actually try to fix it?
That is one of the conversations we had with the bond council at our, that work session there that we did. Yeah, that's the goal. Yeah, that's the goal. It's a couple of things. You have to look at the impact to the budget. You certainly want to lock in low rates. Even if you bonded today, and I had just said that rates have doubled in the last year, you're still at historic low rates. That maybe not as low as the low could be, but they're still historically low. And we're always in favor of locking in low rates for the future, because nobody knows what the future is, right? So it's managing risk. And, in municipal government, again, when the note rates were 0.5, 0.75, it's very difficult to get people motivated to lock them in. But now that spread has narrowed and basically gone away. The interest rate spread is disintegrated. So short-term debt on some of the notes is as high as 2.5, and long-term debt is much higher than that. It might be 2.9. 10 years at 2.99 now, right under 3.
What else can't we touch?
I know I'm not giving you any good news, right? So, insurance, I'll let Chris talk about that, because I don't know if there's anything in there.
Those are pretty much the numbers. That's the total gross cost of health insurance minus the employee contributions, retirees, payments, that, and also, I'm assuming that you're also including the JIP payments. That's all lumped into there. So,
it's everything but group health. Group health is obviously can't touch.
So insurance, we can't touch you?
Oh, and you know what's also built into that insurance line is those QBE payments. So that's not in your legal. That's not in your legal expense. That's in the insurance side of it. So, and that number, I would never give you a minimum. I mean, I have no idea what that number is. I don't think that I'm aware of even half of the lawsuits that are out there right now. I don't know, I know that they increased our deductibles, right? And then you have the 20% co-insurance for anything after that with no limit, right? So I have no idea what these numbers are going to be. Like I said, when I got a stack of bills, we had to pay $120,000 for like 1 quarter of billing. That number could be anything. I don't know if that was the end or the beginning. So, I wouldn't reduce it. If anything, I would say, if you had any contacts at these places that would be able to share, a better accounting of what their projections were on these cases, then that would certainly be some place to look for some more information. But I sat with Catherine on many occasions trying to get any information that we could possibly get, and we got nowhere. I think she had made requests for payment plans. Yeah, but I mean, even working with us, we got a stack of bills. Can we have a payment plan for this? Can we give you half this year, half next year, to try to ease the burden on the budget? There's pretty much no wiggle room. So you're kind of between a rock and a hard place there with it.
Group health, non-discretionary?
What do you mean?
Group health, the $1.6 million, that's non-discretionary, right? That's regular.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's
the number.
And there's the wiggle room that's in there is if somebody gets married, you need to be able to pay for that portion of the health insurance. So it's not like there's A lot of
Chris, 20% increase year over year is almost, I mean, it's obviously unsustainable. What do you see? You do a lot of municipality work.
In which
Your
line?
insurance, there's 20%, 510 to 628.
Well, that's 100% because of the loss. Perfectly honest with you, I haven't been in a municipality with that many lawsuits, so,
It's the lawsuits.
yeah,
So the
you can't
lawsuits is
control it.
under insurance and under legal.
It's under insurance because we're paying the insurance company,
Yeah.
yes, technically.
When somebody sues and it's covered by the JIP, it goes under insurance.
Okay.
When they sue and it's prerogative right, or road to show cause, and then the JIP doesn't cover that, so then you have to pay fully out of your pocket.
That's under the legal. Okay, got it.
So
That's the difference.
my guess is that the police terminal leave is a hard number there. I mean, it's almost like an exact number, so that,
The police one is exact, yeah.
yeah, it's an exact. So I would say non-discretionary there.
But there were, what's the other two above that though?
Police only.
Police O&E and legal
Well,
services.
police only does have a line item of 90,000 for vehicles.
If they change them to SUVs,
You can-
and a lot of police departments would prefer that, right? They have to sit in this little car, and they have the equipment on their side, and they can't fit.
Yeah, we actually spoke about that, and I'll go back and have another conversation about that.
It does mean you can bond them, but it doesn't mean they're free.
So you're still, yeah, you're just paying interest on them now.
There was a distinction made between pursuit class vehicle, which is not SUVs versus patrol car.
And the SUV Explorer doesn't qualify, it's only sort of Expedition / Tahoe that would qualify as vehicles that are SUVs that would be able to be capitalized.
Explorers don't count?
Explorers.
I thought they did.
As far as I'm aware, any SUV counts as a capital item. We can check with
Can you check
Steve on
that?
that.
The chief told us otherwise today.
I don't know if he's thinking that it's, since they can use it as a pursuit vehicle, maybe they're not allowed to.
That was his reason he cited, but
It's a bond law question that I can talk to Steve about tomorrow, yep.
Explorer?
You know what's funny, that word Explorer came up, in our conversation with Steve that day. I just had it, in general. But I'll have him double check that. But he specifically used the word Explorer.
yeah, it's
It
still,
must be a common
it's a $90,000 line item.
The grants are untouchable only because they're just a direct offset to a revenue up on top. So it really wouldn't do any good to reduce it because then you'd reduce the revenue. So that's a wash. Shade tree obviously is discretionary. Salaries and wage, out of
Shade
cap.
trees, I'll jump in there, the council gave me the task of going to shade tree meeting last week. They have a forestry program that they have to complete this year, and there's other expenses that go in there. Otherwise,
Otherwise what?
it's something that has to get done this year. There's not much room there, and a lot of those bills,
But what are we getting for 32,000? We don't know.
Actually, 82,000.
say that.
82,000. Oh, the Flag City USA flag?
Yeah. Other salaries and wages, I don't know if there's any retirements built in there or new hires.
Their only new hires were, I think that we have one in the police department. As far as DPW, we already hired the new hires, right?
Yeah.
So that's all built in. There's really nothing else unless DPW overtime is probably the largest, and that's a very small number relative to everything else.
And the next one is BCUA, and that's definitely not discretionary. And that's just a direct bill from Bergen County. Accumulated absence, again, starting to fund, I guess that's just a $50,000, starting to fund to prevent the terminal leave payout on the bigger numbers. So the more and more you put in accumulated absence, the less and less you'll have to pay at the terminal leave. So it's kind of a catch-22. That's always the most common area to cut. And then I have to hear, well, why are we paying out so much in accumulated absence? Because you didn't put anything in accumulated absence over the years. So when you have a terminal payment, you got to make the terminal payment. So yes, that's discretionary, but just be careful. Libraries, library capital improvement fund, I think we've demonstrated tonight that you need that. You can't touch interest on the debt. You can't touch the special emergency. And like I said, the reserve for uncollected taxes with the asterisk there, you can go down to high sixes. Let's call it 675.
We do have judgments for $75,000 difference.
Yeah, so
You can do it.
but then it's going to end up maybe in tax appeals or somewhere else.
Okay. And then in terms of using surplus, how does that relate to all this?
The maximum, you have an additional $540,000 that you can use in surplus. That would get you to zero.
545,000?
It's 541, yeah.
Just elaborate on the zero.
That will get you to zero cash surplus, which is then going to be potentially replenished by increasing revenue year over year, miscellaneous revenue not anticipated if our tax rate is higher, our tax collection rate is higher than what we thought we were going to have, and/or lapsed appropriation reserves. As far as the lapsed appropriation reserves, you saw it not that long ago. I transferred about $200,000 into the 2017 legal lines, which is now spent. So that number is not very high anymore. It'll probably be lower than it has been in previous years. And, we pretty much anticipate to the max what we could for, based on what we received in previous year. So if we aren't consistent with our collection, you're not going to see much replenishment in surplus there.
And just keep in mind, you're at $1.3 million. If you go to $1.8 million, which is another $500,000, you may not even be able to do the $1.3 million next year.
Yeah, you can only use what you have. Right, so it's the same thing with the general capital. You saw that you had to use 400, and all of a sudden you can only use 200. That's a $200,000 deficit in the budget the following year, and it would be listed on your budget document as a what is the word that you use? User-friendly budget. It's a structural imbalance, right? Because you're not going to be able to guarantee that you can use it again in the following year.
LG in this budget, how much in revenue is in this budget for LG?
In revenue for construction fees or for
any type of revenue we would generate from that?
We're being a tax rate, so it would be strictly from construction fees, no other fees.
Not much, right? That's not this year.
I would say the answer is probably none, and the reason for that is, under this structure, you can only anticipate what you collected in the prior year. So if there were no LG monies collected in 17, then the answer would be zero for 18. Now, what the LG monies will give us, as in Chris's explanation of surplus, it will give us some surplus for next year, but I don't have a hard number for that. Now, another option you do have, just to make sure everybody's perfectly clear on this, if we can get a letter from the construction code official outlining what the fees are going to be, we could ask, when we send the budget down, for permission to include those revenues. So the short answer is, how much is in here is zero, but the potential of what you could put in there is really how well it could be documented. A check would be nice too. If we can show them a check, that's usually a really good way of getting it accepted.
So we have nothing in here from building department?
We only have what was collected the prior year, which is all you're allowed by statute.
Right.
So anything new,
No, I got that, yeah.
but I don't want to tell you can't do it. You certainly can, it's just there's a little work involved.
What line item?
And it's a one-time revenue.
What line item is that?
Yeah, where's the line
Is that local revenue? Other local revenue?
That would be under other, yeah.
Other local revenue?
Yep.
When you have one-off projects like this, unless it's going to be a 3 or 4 or 5 year long project, it's exactly going back to the general capital, right? You're going to have one big year, And then the next year, you're going to have a deficit for the entire amount that you increased the budget this year. Right? So unless you have another one-off event next year to make up for that, you will have a shortfall next year. So when you anticipate one-off events, one-time revenue, that's one of the check boxes on the structural and balance sheet, is, you are literally kicking the can to the next year.
Unless the construction code department is going to tell us you're going to get a revenue stream for the next 2, 3, 4 years.
Which
of
may
an
be
ongoing project,
maybe the
right.
instance here.
If it's an ongoing project, then, you would try to taper it off by the time it fell off.
Exactly, right, exactly.
We also have the 2 properties, the one on Sage Road. That one's complete now, right? I don't know, because property taxes collected on that, I don't know if those are, whether that's included. And then we also have the Jeep dealer, right, which is now.
Yeah, anything that's on the assessment list is already, that's included in your evaluation, that's on the net taxable value. So that's all built into this number, so until it ends up on the book, in the book, it doesn't have any impact.
Now, the actual collected in cash specifically for construction code official out of that $1.3 million was 514,000 in 17. So we're budgeting 513. We're going pretty close. It's 513,835.
That was the number for
Actual collected construction code official fees and permits.
in 17.
In 17, yes. And Carol, for 18, we're using 513, just like a rounded number. And then,
Sorry, can you give us the entire breakdown of that $1,350,000 surplus of the other local revenues?
Sure, oh yeah, we'll go through them.
Thank you.
So let's start with licenses,
Okay.
alcoholic beverage, you collected 20, we're using 20. Construction code 513.8, we're using 513.
Okay.
Fees and permits other, 39.6, we're using 39,000.
Wait to Chris.
Oh, here, it's right, you can just pick up.
You have the sheet in front
I
of you.
know, I just want to...
No, it's right here, it's on page 4. You have it, it was in front of me, somebody left it here.
Well, I think it's still in.
Yeah, it's right there, page 4. Sheet 4, I'm sorry, sheet 4. There's your revenues, and then it goes on to sheet 5.
I see it.
And we're maxed out on liquor licenses, we can't go any higher than the amount that we charge. No, we can't, all right. Yeah, so that's what,
So what happened with the sewer hookup fees?
That was, I was going to bring that up before when we were discussing, what happens if you overestimate. So in 2016, you collected 210,000 in sewer hookup fees. So we budgeted 210,000 for 17. The actual number came in at 166. So again, be careful,
Is that the right number though, or?
Oh, yeah.
That's the max that you can
That's the
anticipate
max you can anticipate.
without really good guidance.
Am I going to know what you're going to collect for 18 in total? I have no idea. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, unless you know of a big, condo that's going up, that have a bunch of sewer hookups or anything like that, there's really no way to know. You talk to the building department and see if they know.
But that's not, it's close.
Not that bad.
Yeah, it's, right. Percentage-wise, it's not terrible.
No. Okay, so, what questions does anybody have?
Got money here on elevator fees. There we go.
no, in elevator fees, we can go up, we just have to redo the ordinance. There's a percentage for elevator fees.
Or you can raise the fees.
Right.
Yes.
$49.
Well, I'm highly confident that we will get this to very reasonable.
So what is our plan?
I would keep in mind, though, we do need an introduction date. I would like to
Oh,
push you
yeah,
to, you
we're
know.
not leaving here
So what
on the journey.
I think what the
until we-
plan is, here's the plan. Everybody spend some time reflecting on the things that we can change. Come back with 5 recommendations where we could make some substantial efforts. And surplus has already been discussed, so you can't use that to quantify.
And while we have everybody here, asking,
We don't actually have everyone here, because Councilwoman Hoda, but we can still...
That's one person. We have a majority of us here. Everybody who's still on their calendars. And,
April 30?
Yeah, what is it? Yeah, April 3rd.
Works for me.
Sometimes those, but I can't, I won't be here.
What's that?
May 1st.
May 1st is okay too?
How about May 1st? Can you do May 1st?
It depends on what time. I have a seminar that one. I'm sitting there.
I could do the Monday, that Monday, I can't.
Yeah, I already sent you the link.
The 30th is next Monday, right?
Yeah, 30th is Monday. I'm not here, but I can ask Bruce.
Okay.
Can you just do it?
Pencil it in and then
I can ask Ray.
So we're looking at an introduction on,
No, no, you.
No, this
We're
is another
still waiting.
talk about.
Yeah.
We have to figure out what we're introducing.
Yeah.
We're still working on it.
We're not introducing a budget, a
I'm
giant budget.
I'm just trying to,
putting that on the record.
I'm sorry. I was just trying to get an idea of when we're looking at,
We're gonna have another work session
Yeah.
on Monday. Hopefully everybody comes back with 5 great
Okay, I'm
ideas.
gonna ask to help the council here, Mayor. Okay, Monday, we're good for Monday?
Yeah,
I'm not sure,
Then
I
it's
can't do it on Monday. I don't know if you need me here for that, but I can't do that on Monday.
You can't be on the 30th?
You know, I haven't been on Monday night.
We need him to be here.
How about Tuesday? Am I a little earlier?
Tuesday, I'm open right now. One of my towns might be adopting, and if they adopt, we're waiting on budget approval, state approval. If they adopt, I could be at that also.
Monday during the day work.
Yeah. Monday during the day works.
Okay.
Okay.
Time would be good for you.
I would have to be out up here in 45 minutes. I'd have to be out of here by 4.
Yeah.
Two?
Monday, 2 o'clock.
2 o'clock.
Yeah.
We're gonna leave here to leave, we'll be on our
Yeah.
Yeah, that's...
2 o'clock here.
You want to do it here or next door?
Yeah, probably 2 o'clock, okay. Now, quick question, I think, if, Chris, would this come from you, I guess not, Paul? All of the categories that you just went through that said, how we go with it, you know, the ones that they can look at. Is that entire breakdown in here? Or no?
yeah, sure.
Breakdown?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't mean just a line numbers. Like the full breakdown of that category.
No, that's not the budget. No. That's Chris
The
has.
breakdown of that category was, I know some of you had it in front of you, it's that Unidex report. And that matches that, it matches the document that you have. I don't know what's in it.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so the most recent one that went out matches those numbers identical, it's just the detail of it. And basically, the discretionary items are anything that says O/E, for the most part.
Right.
Some of them are not, but for the most part, it's
Does everybody understand
O/E.
where they are in here?
Yeah. If I have any questions, I'll
Okay,
email you.
And that's largely in the same order as the budget document. So if you went page by page, put them next to each other.
We can come up with. And if there's if anybody has any questions at all, just email Chris, if he has to, I'd like to hear, I'd love to hear the questions if you can, was that, if you can just forward the questions? Okay, how do we do that, and let her forward, because, we'll come up with some answers by Monday.
So I'm going to send out a public notice tomorrow just for this.
Well, there might be something else, we're gonna be in for a walk tomorrow. What do you-
There might be one other thing tomorrow.
Yeah, so let's just see, just wait for us.
What's your deadline, Wednesday?
I'm kidding.
Keep in mind that a lot of these OE budgets are directly from the department, so if you probably want to check with them to have them, give you the breakdown of why they chose what they did, similar to what Chief Lewis just did there.
Remember what does an MPA stand for?
MPA, Masters of Public Administration. That's somebody, some, Masters of Accounting. or-
No, we were-
MPA.
We good?
We're good, all right.
You want me here on Monday?
Yes. 2 to 4, right?
Can I have a motion?
Second.
Favor?
Aye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike vacation.
Oh, he did.
All right.
Tomorrow morning, 9:30.